Finally, we're getting this update on Beth Mead.
It's been called an epidemic.
She suffered a ruptured anterior cruciate ligaments.
The anterior cruciate ligament, the ACL, is only a small band of tissue, but tearing it is massive.
There's a 90 minutes in theatre with me, and then there is 1 year of rehabilitation with your physiotherapist afterwards.
Those 3 letters are feared throughout the women's game.
This unfortunately means that Beth is set for an extended period on the sidelines.
Around 30 players, enough for an entire extra squad, will miss the World Cup after suffering injuries. And we don't really understand why.
Hopefully we get the research that we need to stop these injuries happening so often.
Even as women's football has boomed, research has lagged behind.
In our world, men's football takes priority over women's.
Researchers are trying to change that, to solve the puzzle.
It's definitely a jigsaw, and it's about sort of putting all the pieces together.
Media Day in St George's Park, and the England women's team are getting ready to head down under for the World Cup, without 2 of their star players. Beth Mead and captain Leah Williamson were vital parts of the Euro-winning team and had dreams of World Cup glory, but they're out with anterior cruciate ligament injuries. Even as the rest of the squad prepares, the possibility of an ACL injury and a year away from the game is never far from mind. And defender Jess Carter has a question we'll hear repeated again and again. Why does this happen to female players so often, and how is it that we don't know?
We just feel more could be done to support us. Why are there so many injuries? How can we prevent it? Why are they happening? You know, and I think that a question I sometimes ask is, if this was happening to high-profile men's players, would more work be going in to try and to improve things, really?
It's not just Beth Mead and Leah Williamson. The USA hasn't got its midfield star Katerina Macario, Canada's Janine Beckie is out, and the Netherlands are missing Ballon d'Or winner Vivianne Miedema. In fact, between 25 and 30 players in total are missing out on the World Cup with this same injury. And they're just the ones who'd likely have played in the tournament. One researcher has found that nearly 200 elite players globally have torn their ACL since January 2022.
So we'll have a dose of antibiotics, dose of TXA, some muscle relaxants, set them up like we always do for an ACL.
Surgeon Luke Jones carries out hundreds of knee ligament surgeries each year at King Edward VII Hospital in London. He's preparing for 2 more today.
ACL also on the left-hand side. So from my point of view, differences in kit are that it's going to be a 5mm saw, 10mm saw, 2mm drill.
Before the operation, he explained how ACL injuries happen and why they're so severe.
It's quite a complicated joint that bends, extends, rotates, slides and rolls. So we have the posterior cruciate sat at the back of the knee, but if we move the kneecap out of the way here, what we can see is the anterior cruciate ligament that sits on the surface of the shin bone here. And as the knee bends and rotates, that ligament is put under strain, and if we move outside its ability to constrain the knee, then it will tear. And you can see, even in this simplified model, other structures are moving inside the joint at the same time. So it's very common not just to have an ACL injury, but other associated soft tissue or indeed bony injuries inside the knee at the same time.
I mean, even the model's making me wince a bit when you move it back like that.
Exactly right, yeah.
He's sure something is going wrong with ACL injuries in some female sports, including football, because in other disciplines they don't happen nearly as often.
If you compare sports where males and females start at the same age, have the same training intensity throughout their sporting life and perform the same movements during that sport, then actually the rupture rates equalise. And a very good example for that is elite dancers. So elite dance athletes, where the males and females start their training at the same age, they perform the same pivoting, jumping, twisting movements, and they have the same intensity of training and the same conditions. If you compare their rupture rates, they're actually equalised. And what that suggests is the impact of your training and your conditioning is really essential in avoiding this injury. Great. Knife, please.
The surgery takes about 90 minutes, and today's patient is a young man.
So you can see where it's pulled off completely, so that wall on the lateral side is completely empty there.
First, Luke removes the patient's hamstring.
All right, great.
He'll use that as a replacement ligament after some careful needlework. That goes back inside the patient's knee through a combination of extremely delicate keyhole surgery and some pretty vigorous drilling
Man up, please.
and hammering.
It's amazing to have access like this to an operating theatre. That replacement ligament has just gone in. This only takes 90 minutes, but the rehabilitation can take a year. It can be a huge setback for athletes.
Women are up to 3.5 times more likely to suffer a non-contact ACL injury than men are. Of those who suffer an ACL injury, 45% never compete again. And 35% don't meet their previous level of athleticism. Up to half of 15 to 30-year-olds show signs of osteoarthritis just a decade after having an ACL injury, much higher than the average prevalence of 7% in 18 to 44-year-olds.
Even at the elite level, there is serious concern around ACL injuries, and that's despite all the support, all the attention those players get. But what's it like when you don't have that support, when you don't have that attention? Well, that's why we've come here to Kent to see some non-league grassroots football.
It's pre-season for the Gravesham Girls and Women's Football Club, founded in 1999.
Yeah, well, I played from the age of 6.
Keely Oliver and Tony Allen have both done their ACL in the past and have the scars to prove it, which they're happy to compare.
Obviously I was in goal, took to the ground, twisted my knees, like dislocated, went like both ways, and then I just screamed, like literally everyone thought it was a fox or something.
It's quite daunting, especially when you realise it's not just football that it can impact, especially, you know, we have lives outside of football and it you know, impacts that as well.
Attitudes have moved on from the days when some said women's bodies weren't suited to what they called men's sports. And the science has moved on too. We now know there's a whole host of factors that can play a part in an injury. Physiological ones, yes, but also cultural.
Do you think, along with people not understanding the mechanics as much, that a lot of women's teams are playing on pitches which aren't good, or they're very changeable, and that can also increase the risk of injury?
Yeah, obviously with women's games, other than, you know, grassroots young children, the ladies themselves, they have to always have a 2:00 kick-off, and that is because in our world, men's football takes priority over women's. So
you always have to play after.
Yeah,
so
our
pitches
pitches
are
always ruined.
St Mary's University, Twickenham, a hub for sports science research. Dr. Kat Occombe-Krieger co-leads the injury prevention team here and is also a medical researcher for FIFA.
In terms of the research, has there traditionally been as much attention as on men's?
There's been some attention, but no, like generally, and that's across all research in football and in sports medicine, that male has been like the norm, and then we've done special work occasionally on women, so we're lacking a lot of knowledge in how we prevent, how we manage these ACL injuries.
We're back to that question of why. The problem is, there isn't just one answer.
I've made a list the other day, and I think there were 30-some reasons that I think have been discussed in the literature that I could find. And I think we can split it into two main categories, and I like to call them nature and nurture. So the nature is like the biology, so the genes, the way we're shaped, the muscle mass, etc., that women sort of tend to have that's different from men, but also the nurture, so the environment that the women are in, so the way that young female players are managed compared to male players, the facilities they have, the professionalism around the sport, the quality of the staff that they have available.
In Manchester, Professor Kirsty Elliott-Sale is working with clubs, including Arsenal, to understand the issue. But the problem isn't just that there are lots of factors, it's that the importance of those factors can change too.
It's definitely a jigsaw, and it's about sort of putting all the pieces together. And I think it's even probably more complicated than that once we have all the pieces, we don't necessarily know which factor is going to play a bigger role on any given day. So it's not like all of the pieces are the same size. Some days, a particular factor that might influence this type of injury might be amplified, whereas on another day it might be turned down.
Professor Elliott-Sale is looking at one aspect in particular: how hormones, whether from menstruation or the pill, can alter the flexibility of ligaments, and how that might affect injuries.
What's this contraption?
It's a good question. So we're lucky enough to have a state-of-the-art machine here at the Institute of Sport, which can generate some numbers around anterior knee laxity, and then we can use these numbers as part of that bigger jigsaw that we were talking about.
As people like me are coming in quite regularly to understand the differences, especially in terms of hormones.
Yeah, so absolutely. So this machine is great because it's portable, so we can take it to a particular club or organisation wherever we want to go, and then we can do that maybe say across a season, so looking at maybe just at the end of the off season into pre-season training then and throughout the competitive season to see if there are changes as a result of, as we said, maybe match congestion, different training loads.
Even if ACL injuries are complicated, everyone we spoke to agreed that strength and conditioning training was useful in preventing them. And the good news is that there's progress here.
It's always hard to make the time difference work with Australia, so I really appreciate it. It's great to speak to you for Sky.
Matt Whalen is a sports scientist who works with the Australian men's and women's football teams. He spoke to us in camp with the men's under-23s. They introduced a programme called Perform Plus, which can be worked into warm-ups that has reduced injuries, including ACLs, by 40%. And crucially, it's not just for elite players.
So this is designed that mum and dad coaches can just go online, all the videos are there, there's information about how you can deliver it with your athletes from under 7s through to 55, 95 if you wanted to, can do these exercises. The benefit of that for us, say at the higher end level, with working with national teams, is if we have players that have been doing that since they're 12, 13, 14, it makes our lives a lot easier.
So hyperflex the knee for me nice and gently, off we go.
Hopefully, it would also mean fewer female players ending up here on the operating table. And fewer footballers missing out on a shot at glory. And more women at every level enjoying the game. Solving the puzzle and closing the gap, so that women playing the same sport as men no longer have to put more on the line.